Hi, I'm Nick McCarthy, and thank you for sticking around for this virtual conversation with the filmmaker behind Truman and Tennessee, an intimate conversation. This dual innovative portrait pulled us over right when the programming team saw it, so we were delighted to present it to you, and I'm sure you enjoyed it. So without further ado, it's my absolute honor and pleasure to bring out the director of Truman and Tennessee, an intimate conversation, Lisa Imordino Vreeland.
Hi, I'm so happy to share this film with everybody. It's really exciting. Either way, any way it's being done, I'm just so happy to share with everyone. And that was always our wish, to have a really strong New York crowd. And so I think this is actually the most perfect one.
In any way possible. I know that your film has spoken and will speak to so many more people too. So we were delighted to be able to present it. And with that is actually my first question. I know I have, a history of reading Tennessee's plays, seeing them, seeing the film adaptations, the same thing with Truman Capote and his literature and the films that were adapted from his work. I'm curious to hear a bit of background on your relationship to these iconic queer American artists, and your decision to create a dual portrait that showed both of them sort of in equal standings of history and sort of literary significance.
It was a very kind of auspicious start, because I had started the film just with really making a Truman Capote film, and because another film was made before that, it was all of a sudden I said, well, people maybe don't want another Truman Capote film, and my producer Mark Lee decided, he said, why don't you throw in Tennessee Williams? And once we threw it in there, there was all of a sudden this amazing story that emerged. And I had done all of my work on Truman, all the research for Truman, and I had to catch up with all the Tennessee Williams research. But what was fascinating is that I saw that there was, I knew that they were friends. They were friends, and they were also frenemies in a certain sense. But as a team, what we decided to do was to really create these parallel stories, and to tell not their stories in their life in a chronological fashion, but just talk about this overlap of being gay writers from the Deep South, with struggling with creativity, this desire to write from a very young age, trying to stay on top of their game at all times, the struggle to do that, how alcoholism, addiction became part of their lives, and the story of their lovers, the stories of this amazing expat life that they both really loved, because, Tennessee spent a lot of his time in Rome, and Truman spent a lot of time in Paris, but he had a house in Verbier, and he traveled around. He always had kind of summer places, and so there was a really interesting story that emerged, but what it also gave us was a lot of freedom to create a narrative it could go in any direction it wanted to. And that's where we really had a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, and you do a really marvelous job of being able to sort of juxtapose them and illuminate even further. I know there's a wealth of audio interviews as well as talk show appearances, which I really love seeing. I was sort of curious if you always wanted to incorporate, those elements, or how the structure sort of came to be as you built this out, and also how to limit that down, because I know there's probably a wealth of wonderful material.
There is. And, the one thing that we as a team decided we wanted from the very beginning was we wanted them to speak. We wanted their voices. And we knew that there was going to be a part of it that was going to be of these archival film interviews. And then the other part was going to be really from the writings, from the research, from letters that they wrote to each other or to friends, or just, reading the wealth of material that went in the process of research that I always do. And that's really the best fun, is to have these stories can come together like that. But, there was a great surprise when we found this David Frost interview, and a lot of the film is based in that. And because I think that David Frost captured them both at a moment in an interview that they were in a sense, they were very kind of open to a desire to speak about things. And David Frost has an intimacy with them in the way that he interviews and really probes into their lives. And, you can see it just in the way, the physicality of how he sits and interviews them, because he's, bent over and touching them and doing something that often you don't see on on some of these talk shows. And so really we try to base it mostly in David Frost. Of course we have Dick Cavett, because Dick Cavett in my eyes has always been a god. And so those were the two primary ones. But, you know, we were also incredibly fortunate to have the collaboration of Jim Parsons, who played Truman Capote, and Zach Quinto, who played Tennessee Williams, who brought a completely different depth to the whole story, because here you have two actors who are really passionate about the theater, and who also are close friends. And it brought a completely different dimension to the film itself. And it really breathed life into their words. And I would think that both Truman and Tennessee, if they knew that that's who was playing their voices, they would be very happy, very, very happy. And they were great to work with. They were really, really great.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to ask a bit about sort of how they got involved. And also, I know I saw Zachary Quinto in the Glass Menagerie. Did Jim or Zachary share with you anything that, you know, was of huge impact on their lives that, you know, you want to share here?
Well, I think that, I mean, I don't really want to speak for them, but I can tell you that in the process of working with Zach, especially, you know, he's a real Tennessee Williams fan, and, you know, he has all the books, he's read all the biographies, and, you know, Tennessee Williams is certainly a reference point in Zach's whole creative world. There's no doubt. And the same thing, I mean, he also has that same influence on Jim, and Jim also really loved the idea of being able to capture Truman Capote, but Truman Capote in a certain point of his life that was not the Truman Capote that we often have seen, which is, you know, the broken down Capote. And that was not, you know, that was not what we intended to do, because, you know, it's rare that you can find these two writers like this really talking about their inner lives and having their inner lives come alive. And that was really, we wanted to create this intimacy between them on screen. And I think that the way that the dialogue was created, we really were able to do it, because they really, it seems like they're just talking to each other most of the time. And using the David Frost interview as a launch pad for a lot of those moments was great. And then there were these real moments that they were together. You know, we knew that they were together in Ischia, and we kind of got these moments of their dialogue from different sources, and it's really funny. I mean, it's really, really funny, because there's always these kind of like silly little jealousies over things, and, you know, comments about lovers, and, you know, cruising, and you know, it's all of these things, but there's something fun about it also, and there's also this, you know, there's also this sadness. There's this underlying tone of sadness, because here you have these two men that, you know, when Truman grew up, you know, his mother left him in these hotel rooms and just like abandoned him. And so he never really had parents. He never had and he also had a mother who was an alcoholic, which unfortunately led him down the path of addiction. And, you know, his grandparents were really the ones who were there for him. And his father also was a drinker. And so, you know, you have two men who are also suffer from depression. And these are things that Tennessee spoke about often in his work. You know, he really spoke about emotions. He really laid it all out there. And, but, you know, you can see it. I mean, you can see how they just kind of suffered and suffered. And it's nice not to have to shy away from that.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that you don't shy away from that, and you really show these vulnerabilities, because it illuminates exactly what their interiority is. And, you know, I found it completely illuminating for two artists that I already was familiar with, to be presented in this way too, with such candor.
Yes.
And what I love, I know probably too, a lot of the cinephiles that are watching this film through our festival too, is the incorporation of film clips too, especially, you know, directly relating to a story from someone's life, and then showing, you know, a clip from Cat on a Hot Tin Roof where it makes this direct connection. Did you always have in mind that you would be incorporating these film clips?
I did. You know what, the fact is that we shot, so, you know, I don't know if you're familiar with my work, but I really love archival footage in a lot of different ways. And I always love the discovering something and presenting something for the first time. And, you know, there are all these wonderful distorted photographs of New York. And there's also these kind of, during the whole kind of drinking and Dr. Feelgood moment, there are these Warholian type of images. They look like it just because of the colors, but these are all by the photographer David Atty, and these are all images that have never been seen before. And so I collaborated with his son, the estate, and it was just like a joy to be able to use these. And we wanted to use film clips, and watching these films again, I mean, how many times have we all seen them? But when you're actually going in and looking at them for maybe the fifth time you've seen it in your life, and it looks and it felt completely different this time. And just that scene in The Streetcar Named Desire that is in the film, and you have Vivian Leigh looking at Marlon Brando. I mean, the look of him, like with him with his shirt off, and you're like, oh my gosh. I mean, he was just so. And it's the same thing. Like you look at Paul Newman today, and you're like, oh my gosh. I mean, he was just perfect, absolutely perfect, and he was also perfectly cast for Tennessee Williams' work. And it just really, it was, I mean, I feel very fortunate to be able to use all this material. And we also knew coming in that we wanted to have this kind of dream-like, these layers of one footage over the next. And we shot primarily, I worked with Shane Ziegler, who I've worked in my past films, and we shot primarily Bolex. And it's just, it's like a treat to use this kind of footage, because it's just, it's luxurious almost. And when you're mixing it with then still photographs, and, it's just really a dream. And the layering really, it's almost as if we're going through Truman's and Tennessee's heads, and we're seeing the visual. And so it's not, it's abstract, it's not completely obvious, but there's something about beauty and this like incessant desire and need for beauty that they were always really trying for through their words, through their written words. And I think that, Tennessee Williams certainly deserves a full feature doc. I mean, there's no doubt. I don't know why nothing has been done. We've seen a lot of things through Truman Capote throughout the years, if it's something just on Breakfast at Tiffany's or In Cold Blood or, any other docs. But the words and their written words is really what counts and have the real weight. And we wanted to use their words. We wanted to have their words guide us through the film. And I think that, we were able to do that if it was not direct quotes from Truman's books to, what Jim and Zach are actually saying.
Yeah, I think that the contextual framing that you bring with incorporation of the film clips and these other materials really just, bring to life things and layers that we may not have considered when we're watching these films. And you mentioned Tennessee, he's so ahead of his time in so many ways too.
Oh my gosh.
Like a nod to like Baby Doll and the reaction. It's also like, well, he got the Oscar nomination, and we know that Baby Doll is a classic, and a lot of cinephiles really hold as one of their favorite films of all time. So I'm glad that sort of brought up in that way again to really to honor their legacy if at the time they were a bit misunderstood. So I really appreciate that.
No, I agree. And I think that, I was familiar with Tennessee Williams' work, and even now, have I seen every play? No, I haven't, obviously. But it was his vulnerable side, but it was also his courage to write about the things that he wanted to. And that's what I really like, because there's something, and I also struggled with, knowing a lot about Truman Capote. And I never claim that I'm an expert on either of, when I'm making films of knowing absolutely everything. So I forget like immediately dates of when they're born. I mean, like I couldn't even, if you asked me now, I wouldn't even know. Okay. But what I feel like we brought out the inner workings of them. And the other thing that we were able to do was that we like to tell authentic stories, and that's something that comes out, and we don't shy away from it. And he was talking about things that are just normal human behavior that we do talk about today, and we address these things. And that of course has become the vernacular of the theater world, but a lot of what he wrote back then has become part of the theater world, but it also has become part of just the creative world now. And Truman also, he gave us something, he introduced us to this whole idea of stardom. of being a celebrity well before it was in place. I mean, if we think about the fact that Andy Warhol wanted to hang out with him and just follow him around with a tape recorder, and there are hours and hours and hours of these recorded conversations between the two of them at the Andy Warhol Museum in Pittsburgh. And I was thinking, I was like, oh, I could go down. And I was saying to myself, I was like, I bet there's not a lot of conversation, because Warhol has a way of not speaking that much.
You're reticent, yeah.
Right. So I was just like, this could take me a really long time. I don't think I'm going to do that. Okay. But it was really, as a team, because of course I worked with Bernadine Coalesce, who had edited Peggy Guggenheim and also had edited Love Cecil. And as a movie to make, it was really fun and thought-provoking and a pleasure, a real pleasure. It wasn't, we wouldn't just kind of walk into the office. And at that time, of course, we could walk into the office, but it was just so nice to be together and tell the story. Yeah. And, it was a really, it just, I mean, this is what's great about making documentaries, is that you put yourself in a situation that you can really learn so much. And I feel like the lucky one here, because I get to, learn more about something that I didn't know as much about before. And I come out finding out so much more about themselves, about the interiors. And I think that that's such a topical subject right now. I mean, as we are all living this kind of strange life. Yeah. It's really good to be honest with yourself and to be able to, and this is, I think if anybody more, Tennessee was the one who really did that. Truman is always a little bit tricky about that, because you didn't quite know if he was 100% there with the truth or not. But he lived a tough young life, and he really drove himself hard.
Yeah, they both lived very, very full lives and at the highest of standards, which is, I think, something that, is something to appreciate in the work that they contributed to everyone. I guess, we have to wrap up pretty soon, but I'd love to know, what you said about the curiosity of being a documentarian, of doing all this research and basically learning so much about lives. I was curious if there was any new information that you came across that you absolutely was like, oh my God, I had no idea about this. This is great, but may not have worked into the final cut. But you'd like to share with the audience now about, either.
Sure. I think, I mean, there were a lot of little things, but I always think of kind of the final statement, and I think about their impact. And, I always tend to visit these 20th century characters, and, there's, without a doubt, Truman's impact was this whole sense of stardom, celebrity, which was well before its time, and he embraced it. And Tennessee, who, I never really had read his works as in depth as I did now. It was, I mean, I go back to Human Emotion, and I just feel that he was, although he was so kind of confused and hurt and under such pressure that he built around himself over the success of the theater and putting on a play, and that it was just hard for him to hold up that standard. He was just talking about his own inner feelings. I mean, that's what was in those plays, and he was just being really honest with himself. And what was nice was that he brought it out to us. And so, I mean, it's a little repetitive from what I said before, but, I just feel very lucky to be able to have the time to devote to something like this.
No, absolutely. And I know that audiences are, very rewarded with all the hard work that you've done to create this dual portrait. I guess, do you have any new projects you're working on right now? You can give a little tease to before we.
Well, I think I may go down. I think I'm going to do Gertrude Stein.
Ooh, all right.
I know. I think it could be. I'm in the writer moment, I believe, and she's just she was fascinating. I mean, I've loved her for years and been interested, and that's a really great story. And I'm just kind of I'm definitely going to do it. I'm just kind of toying with how I'm going to do it, and I think that it's a good audience for you. That's for sure. But she's also kind of super cool. And I think that because, you know, I also try to always do these films to reintroduce these important personalities to new audiences. And I think that people would find her very interesting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's a great subject, and I can't wait to see it.
I know, it'd be fun. Well, thank you for sharing it. I hope you all enjoy it, and, you know, just stay inside, be safe, watch lots of great movies.
Thank you, Lisa.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. Bye.
Bye. And thank you all, audience, for enjoying this wonderful film. Please go to newfest.org. Check out all the films we have to offer. I can promise there are so many goodies ahead, and I'm sure you just enjoyed one of your favorite new documentaries. So please keep on exploring. Go to newfest.org, and we'll see you there. Bye.